Why would an ordinary person, someone who looks just like your neighbor, your teacher, maybe even your best friend, suddenly cross a line and commit an act so shocking that the world cannot understand it? Why would a human being deliberately end the life of another, or in some cases, turn the violence inward and choose to end their own? These questions are as old as humanity itself, and every time we think we found an answer, a new story, a new tragedy, or a new crime reminds us that the mystery goes much deeper than we expected. Tonight, we are going to step into the darkest corners of the human mind, to wander the shadowy landscapes where murder and suicide take root. It won't be easy, but by the end, you may understand more about yourself than you ever imagined. When people hear about murder, the instinct is to label it quickly: evil, monster, psychopath. Those words feel safe. They put a barrier between us and them. But the uncomfortable truth is that murderers are not creatures from another species. They are human. They laugh, they cry, they bleed, and in many cases they live lives that seem painfully ordinary until something inside snaps. Think of Richard Kuklinski, known as the Iceman, who worked as a contract killer. In interviews, he described killing with the same casual tone you or I might use to describe making a sandwich. And yet, if you look into his past, you see a boy beaten brutally by his father, abandoned emotionally by his mother. Violence became his language, his way of solving problems, his survival. Was he born evil or shaped by cruelty? That's the line we'll be tracing again and again. But not every killer is like Kuklinski. Some are not calculating, not methodical, but swept away in moments of raw emotion. A jealous lover who stabs their partner in a fit of rage. A father who kills in a drunken argument. These are called crimes of passion, and in them we see the limbic system, the emotional core of the brain, hijacking rational thought. The prefrontal cortex, the part of us that plans and judges, shuts down. For a few seconds or minutes, the person is pure impulse, and in those moments, lives are destroyed forever. What's terrifying is how human this is. Haven't we all felt anger so sharp we wanted to lash out? Haven't we all had moments where control slipped? Most of us never crossed that line. But the line is thinner than we like to admit. And then there are the killers who seem to live in a different reality altogether. Schizophrenia, delusions, paranoia. They can warp the mind until murder feels like survival. Consider Andrea Yates, a mother of 5 in Texas who drowned her children in 2001. The world recoiled, calling her a monster. But psychiatrists discovered she had long battled severe postpartum psychosis. In her distorted mind, killing her children was saving them from eternal damnation. It is almost unbearable to hear, but it forces us to ask, what does responsibility mean when reality itself is broken? Now let's turn to suicide, the violence directed inward. Suicide is not always about a desire for death. Often, it is about ending unbearable pain. Psychologists describe it not as wanting to die, but wanting the suffering to stop. The poet whose words shimmer with beauty and despair. In her novel, The Bell Jar, she described depression as living under a glass dome. You can see the world, but you can't touch it, can't join it. Her suicide in 1963 shocked the literary world, but it also made millions realize that brilliance and suffering often walk hand in hand. Depression doesn't just whisper, it distorts the future until nothing feels possible. In brain scans, researchers see this literally: reduced activity. In regions responsible for motivation and planning, the brain cannot imagine a way forward. Death seems like the only exit door. But suicide is not only modern. In ancient Rome, philosophers like Seneca calmly prepared their deaths, believing suicide could be an honorable way to meet fate. In Japan, seppuku was once a ritual of dignity. In contrast, medieval Europe condemned suicide as sin, a crime against God. History shows us that how we see suicide says as much about society as it does about the individual. When life is stable, suicide feels like a violation. When life is unbearable, suicide can look like an escape, even an act of courage. What about when murder and suicide collide? There's a chilling phenomenon known as murder-suicide, when someone kills others before themselves. These cases are often linked to domestic violence, jealousy, or despair. One of the most shocking examples was Andreas Lubitz, the Germanwings pilot who deliberately crashed a plane in 2015, killing 150 people. Investigations revealed depression, fear of career collapse, and secrecy. His inner pain became the destruction of many. The horror of his decision lies in how personal despair can spiral into collective tragedy. As we explore these stories, one theme repeats again and again: trauma, childhood abuse, neglect, humiliation. The Adverse Childhood Experiences study found that children who endure violence, sexual abuse, or neglect are far more likely to struggle with addiction, mental illness later in life. Trauma is not destiny, but it is a weight carried into adulthood, shaping every choice. Jack the Ripper, the infamous Victorian killer, lived in London's poorest districts, where poverty and abuse were constant. Eileen Wuornos, one of the few female serial killers, grew up in chaos and exploitation. Both show how broken beginnings can echo through an entire life. And yet, not everyone with trauma becomes a killer. Not everyone with depression ends their life. This is where we find resilience, the mystery of why some survive. Research shows that connection is key. Social ties, friendships, family support. These can be the difference between despair and survival. In fact, communities with strong support systems see lower suicide rates. Therapy, meaning small daily rituals. They can anchor us against the storm. But prediction is difficult. Criminologists and psychologists try to spot patterns, histories of abuse, untreated illness, isolation. Beings are complex, unpredictable, and maybe that's what keeps us both fascinated and afraid. We want answers, formulas, guarantees, but life rarely gives them. Philosophers, too, have wrestled with this darkness. Albert Camus wrote that suicide is the fundamental philosophical question. If life has no meaning, why continue? His answer: we must embrace the absurdity of existence and create meaning ourselves. Friedrich Nietzsche warned that when we stare too long into the abyss stares back. But he also believed that confronting darkness can transform us, make us stronger. These ideas don't erase the pain of murder or suicide, but they remind us that how we interpret suffering shapes our survival. As I speak these words, you might wonder, is this just theory, or can we actually prevent these tragedies? The good news is, yes, prevention works. Crisis hotlines save lives every day. Therapy rewires destructive thought patterns. Communities that invest in mental health see measurable declines in suicide and crime. Violence and despair may always exist, but they don't have to define us. And maybe the final lesson is this: every human carries a shadow. Jung, the great psychologist, said that what we refuse to face in ourselves controls us. Murder and suicide are extreme expressions of shadows ignored, pain unacknowledged, darkness left to grow. But when we face those shadows, through honesty, compassion, and connection, we reclaim power. We step out of the darkness. And perhaps, in the end, that is what makes us human.